Hey gang, welcome back to another 52 licks for 2020. We've been dealing with a lot of paradiddle and paradiddle-diddle combinations lately. A lot of kind of bebop-ish stuff from that era. We're going to move on from that pretty quickly, but I'm trying to create a little bit of a thread here so the material that you might be picking up from a couple of the earlier ones, you can connect a few of these in a row and try to draw some information. I tried to connect the Tane and the Tony one, Tony to the Blade one, and then we've been kind of kicking around some ideas that come from Philly Joe Jones, and that's what we're going to do today is break down a Philly Joe Jones lick that again is going to use a paradiddle in some form or fashion, but maybe a little bit differently than you might normally play the paradiddle. So let's dive into that lick. The lick, in the context that he often plays it, is basically a double time phrase. So if it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, digga 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 da da da, that's kind of the phrase. But obviously you can play it fast, and he would play it fast as well. So the phrase goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. One more time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And so that's after an 8th note rest, you've got right, right, left, stick, 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 or stick on stick. So make sure when you play that, although if you want to think of, if you're in double time, you want to think of those, the first several notes as 16th notes. When you get to those last 3 8th notes, which are stick on stick, you got to make sure that you play them even, because really, if the tempo is here, digga 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 da da da, it's really 1, 2, 3, 4, digga 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 da da da, which means that those 3 stick shots are really supposed to feel like 3 quarter notes at the up tempo, not swing 8th notes. So it's not digga 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 da da da. So be clear on that. Otherwise, it's a fairly easy phrase to play. We have some more stick on stick stuff that we can connect to the last Brian Blade one. So Philly used this a ton. He used it in all sorts of contexts. One of my students is transcribing a whole bunch of Philly Joe, a whole bunch of everything right now. And we've run across this lick a few times. So that's kind of why I was in my head. I was like, oh, this is going to be a great one to do. You can hear it on a bunch of records he did. I know it's on, I think, Blues Number 2, which is off of Miles Davis's Someday My Prince Will Come. But man, he's done it on a ton of records. And again, it's this idea of how do we take rudiments and use them in some sort of jazz or bebop connotation, move something around a little bit here or there, and all of a sudden we have this kind of hip phrase. And that's what's happening here with that, the second half of that phrase, which is, obviously a left paradiddle. And just like the Brian Blade, when that leaves us in position to play a stick-on-stick phrase. So those two can you can connect that way. This idea of how to use the paradiddle to put your left hand in position so that your right hand can play a stick-on-stick kind of seamlessly. That's one of a million reasons to use the paradiddle, but that's one that we might be able to build some kind of fresh material off of, so that we don't just sit around and just play paradiddle, 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 paradiddle all day long. We can't even say it that fast, much less spit out a whole bunch of those. After a while, it starts to sound like you're a typewriter. This sort of stuff will break that up for you. So you might be thinking, that's kind of a weird sticking. Why out of nowhere do you start with the 2 rights and then play left, right, left, left, then to the stick shot? Again, the sticking is rest, right, right, left, left, right, right, right. So, there's other ways that you can stick it, right? An alternate way is to play left, left, right, right, left, stick, stick, stick. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think the reason he sticks it the way that he does is because the last one we talked about with Brian Blade about taking a paradiddle but removing 2 notes of the paradiddle so that we can get 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 4. That's sort of like a. Well, in our mind, it's still a paradiddle. We're just leaving out a couple of notes. I think the same thing applies here, because if you fill the first 2 notes with a paradiddle, it becomes paradiddle, paradiddle, left, right, stick shot, stick shot, stick shot. So it might even be an easy way to think of it. And by the way, that's usable language too. I think one of the hip things that he does is not enter on one. You know, and it's kind of a cool thing if you're coming out of a lot of medium tempo. I think it works well. But for a while, if you to get comfortable with the sticking, you can leave the first two notes in. Whole bunch of other language like that's built around those phrases that I can get into a little bit on the PDF. I'll also show some of those alternate stickings and some other ideas that sound like that achieve the same effect, but maybe are voiced around the kit a little bit more. We've been spending a lot of time you know, kind of chopping out a little bit on the snare drum. Some of the PDF is going to break us of that habit so that we can modernize this. One of the things that I think about in terms of language that's happening a little bit more now versus 50, 60 years ago is that a lot of stuff back then was very drum oriented. Start on the snare, have some rudiment, kind of move it around to the toms, you know, Max Roach and AT and Philly Joe's, a lot of what they did. They obviously did get the cymbals involved, but as things progressed with Elvin and Tony, then on to Jack DeJohnette and you know, Billy Cobham and even, you know, Steve Gadd, and then great drummers in the 80s and 90s like Blade and Jeff Tain Watts and Lewis Nash started to incorporate the rest of the kit a little bit more so that everything is equal, that these aren't just kind of only there for the time, and then when we go to solo, we move straight to the snare drum for everything. One of the things that we have to do to keep advancing this language is find creative ways to use stuff that still sound like stuff that we've heard before. It's language is recognizable, but we can then extrapolate it in such a way that sounds fresh and keeps sounding like stuff is new without sounding completely foreign. And everybody's like, I don't know what that dude is doing over there. Okay. Sorry for the rambling at the end there. Just trying to help you guys find ways to use this, you know, in a context that is current, and so that you don't feel like everything you're playing from the bebop era still sounds like it's from the 1950s and the 1960s. Okay. Hope this one helps. See you on the next one. Good luck.